You were there that day. You're a Capitol Police officer. What are your feelings about the fact that everyone involved has been pardoned, even the ones who were violent to police officers?
I think it's very unfortunate that particularly those that were violent and who attacked both me and my fellow officers that day are able to walk totally free. It sends a horrible message to Americans, to the world, to law enforcement, not only Capitol Police, DC Police, who have continued to show up every day, do their jobs in service to others, in service to the American people, to Congress. And it basically says that it's okay to do political violence against and beat police officers. It says that there's nothing wrong with that.
What is up, everyone? This is one of the most interesting clips I've seen in quite some time because we all remember the Great Riot on January 6th. Well, now that President Trump took office, he has now pardoned over 1,500 people / rioters from that event. And obviously, this was a very controversial decision. And here on Piers Morgan Uncensored, he embodies that controversy fully, as we have one of the most notorious rioters, Jacob Chansley, going head-to-head with one of the Capitol riot cops. This is sort of like a red versus blue type of dynamic, and it's very interesting and exciting to watch. So let's get into it, where I'll be giving you my unfiltered take.
Do you think there's a...
No, what says that that's okay is the BLM riots. It says that's okay is the Antifa riots, and there being no prosecutions. That's what says that's okay, is attacking federal buildings and no prosecutions. That's what says that's okay. Forgive me for saying, I don't mean to interrupt, but the double standard, what Victor Davis Hanson was talking about, the asymmetrical justice system, is on full display. And to deny that the Antifa and BLM riots didn't play a role in the demoralization of our police officers and the allowance of this crime spree all across the country is just absolutely silly. The idea that that is not to blame is silly.
Well, it's an interesting point, Winston, isn't it?
Whataboutism, though, it's horrible. This whataboutism. I was a police officer for 5 years. I worked in 2020, the summer in DC. I will not condone any violence against police for whatever political cause, whether it was then on January 6th. And I'm glad we can agree on that. But the difference is that on January 6th, it was not just a riot on the street. There were those like yourself that entered this building illegally and others who were violent against us. And it had never happened before. Not since the War of 1812 and 1814, when the British stormed the Capitol, had this ever happened. Not since the Civil War had we been so divided.
Allow me to apologize. Please allow me to apologize on behalf of all January 6ers and all Trump supporters for what happened to you guys. I don't know if that's happened on live television yet, but allow me to apologize to the police on behalf of all J6ers and all Trump supporters for what happened to you guys on that day.
Well, that's a curveball. An apology on live TV? That's rare in today's political climate, and credit where it's due. It is a mature move. But let's not still forget that apologies only matter when they're matched with accountability. The issue that I have is the same people demanding accountability for January 6th are completely silent about the accountability missing from 2020's riots. Why is it that some officers get sympathy and others get scapegoated? It's almost like empathy is conditional on the politics of the perpetrator. But hey, an apology is better than nothing.
It's absolutely terrible. And if you find out that your own Capitol Police people like Yogananda Pittman or, Tom Manger are covering up what actually happened and the fact that they put you in harm's way, I think you guys have a vested interest in a class action lawsuit for your own work environment, putting you guys in harm's way.
I appreciate that apology. I think, though, the bigger picture is, as an officer, we never victim blame. When a crime is committed against somebody, it is not their fault. And it's more important to look at the bigger picture. Why was that crowd there that day? Who sent them? I remember people telling me that day on January 6th, President Trump sent us here. We are going to get in that building, and thinking there's no way they're going to be so violent, so brutal to actually get past us and break inside, until very shortly after I'm seeing for my own eyes that I was wrong and that the mob, was. And again, could Capitol Police have been more...
Were you talking to Ray Epps? No. Is that who you were talking to?
Well, I want to ask Winston a question, which is this. Winston, do you see a difference between people that day who committed acts of violence against police officers and people like Jacob here who did not? I mean, do you see a qualitative difference between the two.
I
J.D. Vance said he could see an argument for pardoning the non-violent rioters, and I see that argument. You know, they'd all been imprisoned, almost all of them, and many people felt some of the sentencing was way over the top for non-violent acts. Do you see a difference between the two?
I do see a difference, of course. You know, somebody who just entered the building illegally did not commit as bad an act as those who used a stun gun against, you know, my fellow officers, who used bats and 2x4s, bear spray against us. Of course, there is a difference there. You know, I'd like to think some people there that day normally would respect police. They had Blue Lives Matter flags. I like to think that some of those people just perhaps got caught up in the moment and make mistakes. However, no, you know, we all make mistakes, but we must be held accountable for our actions. The justice system imposed, you know, these people got due process. You know, Trump says they're hostages. It acts like they, you know, were victims of this. They're only victims of their own actions. And so,
Absolutely awesome point here. We need to recognize the difference between trespassers and violent offenders, but here's the problem. We only hear this measured distinction when it fits a specific narrative. When BLM or Antifa protesters burned down police stations, it wasn't nuanced. Everyone was just a peaceful protester. Suddenly, when it's January 6th, we are all about separating the trespassers from the stun gun crew. Some get due process, but let's not pretend everyone involved get a fair shake. People sat in solitary confinement for months for trespassing. Meanwhile, actual violent offenders in other riots got slaps on the wrist or no charges at all. If the justice system was as consistent as this officer claims, people might actually trust it. But right now, it looks like the scales of justice have a political weight tipping them over. Let me know if you guys agree down in the comments.
sure, I can see a difference. But again, when you put a blanket pardon like this, particularly those who were violent, you know, it is offensive. And I know Capitol Police officers today who are still working very upset by this action. Why should they continue to do their jobs every day if violence against them is just not going to matter?
Right. And Jacob, before I go to Vinny,
and that rationale applies to Joe Biden and all the pardons he just put out.
Yeah, we're going to come to that, Jacob.
Versus the
Jacob, before I go to Vinny for his response, because he's been waiting patiently, I would just ask you the same question. Do you see a difference yourself? I mean, what do you say about those on the day who did commit acts of violence against police officers? Do you see a difference between them and people like you?
Yes, I do, to be perfectly honest with you. But I respect the president's decision to pardon those people, and I'll tell you why. Because what happened in 2020 with the riots and what's happened with the pardons that Joe Biden has put out there, attention has to be drawn to that. And Donald Trump pardoning some people, that a small percentage of people that harm police officers or committed acts of vandalism on that day, is nothing compared to the damage that was done by the pardons that Joe Biden did, or by the psyop that was perpetrated on the American people by Russia for 4 years, by the Hunter Biden laptop suppression, by these 51 intelligence agents lying, then going after all these people because of January 6th, all the lives that were destroyed. Like, I would way rather have J6ers on the street that hit a cop than I would a child molester from Nicaragua.
Well, that certainly is a bold take. He's pointing out something we should all truly be asking. Why does our justice system go easy on some of the most heinous criminals while throwing the book at political dissenters? The guy makes a valid point. If we're letting child predators walk free but giving 20-year sentences to people who trespassed, maybe the system isn't as fair or impartial as they want us to believe. Shocker.
Okay, look, you make a lot of points there, some of which...
I would have neither.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what would be my point. But before I go to Vinny, Jacob, just to be clear, it seems to me like you would unreservedly condemn the rioters that day who committed acts of violence against police officers, would you?
I believe in nonviolent non-cooperation with evil. If you cooperate with an evil system, you contribute to its evil. That's Gandhi right there, and that's truth. So I believe in nonviolent non-cooperation.
So is that you would condemn the people who committed acts of violence against police officers?
I believe that they have served their time enough, and they've felt the full weight of the government,
that's not the question.
Is something that very few people.
That's not my question.
I condemn violence that happened on January 6th, but I also agree with the pardons.
That's fair enough. But just to be clear, you do condemn the people who committed acts of violence that day, the rioters who were violent?
I just answered your question.
It's a yes. Just to be clear, I don't want to misquote you, so I'm just pinning you down to say yes.
Hey, well, then play the tape back, buddy.
Well, you said you condemn acts of violence, so by definition, I'm assuming you are condemning the rioters who committed acts of violence.
Now you're starting to think for yourself.
Well, can you just say yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you very
Or no.
much. Thank you. I appreciate it. Listen, you know what? I actually appreciate that honesty. I appreciate the candor. I think it moves the debate to a better place when people on all sides of this can concede things which actually we should all agree on. There can be an argument about whether Trump should have pardoned them. There should be no argument, especially when we have one of these police officers sitting in this panel, that violence against police officers is never acceptable and should always be condemned.
I mean, absolutely. Violence against police is never okay, but let's hold everyone to that standard, shall we? Whether it's a Capitol riot or a summer of fiery but mostly peaceful protests, the principle should be the same. The problem is it's not, and that's why people are angry. It's not about excusing bad behavior, it's about demanding consistency. And is that truly too much to ask? Of course, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.